So I'm Mark Bowker. I'm a senior analyst with Enterprise Strategy Group. We're an analyst and consulting firm. I get the opportunity to talk to guys like this all the time, but appreciate you guys coming out and doing an event like this. It's very appreciated. So I'm going to let you guys go one for one, and you can tell us who you are, who you work for, all that stuff. But at the same time, one of the things that I heard this morning was everything about virtualization, what's happening next. And I know there's a lot of people in here that are probably trying to figure out they're doing a lot of on-premise type of virtualization today. And maybe looking at the possibility of moving things off-prem, taking advantage of some public cloud type of computing. And as we go through, whether it's database or whether it's just virtual machines, or you even want to talk about it from a networking perspective. So introduce who you are, who you work for, what you do, and a little bit about this transition from what people are doing today on-prem to an off-prem type of infrastructure would be great.
Okay, sure. My name's John Kelbley. I'm subbing for Jeff Woolsey from Microsoft, who was here. I just actually took him back and dropped him off so he could catch his plane. But I'm a database specialist, or excuse me, data center specialist.
I'm going to ask you hard database questions now.
No, I'm not a database specialist. I can't even spell SQL.
You can tap the shoulder next to the guy next to you.
But I'm a data center specialist here in New England. Previously to being a database specialist, I was a senior technical product manager with Microsoft, Redmond-based, involved in Windows 8 planning, and I've worked with Jeff for, 7 years since he joined Microsoft. So I can hopefully answer a lot of those same questions. So.
Perfect. Do you want to talk a little bit about just that transition I'm talking about? So being, looking at people that are moving on-prem to off-prem, what kind of things should they be planning for? How are they planning for that?
Right.
How is Microsoft participating?
Well, what's really interesting is the different types of cloud offerings that people are interested in. I focus very much on state and local government and a lot of business continuity. I also live down in Connecticut. And in the last 18 months, I've had 3 different weeks of power outages at my house. So my local electric provider has provided me 1/9 of availability, right? Fantastic, right? And state and local governments are faced with those same sort of challenges as far as availability. So a lot of the governments that I work with have experienced lengthy data center outages. New York City is a customer I deal with. They lost an awful lot of buildings down in Manhattan, basements flooded and such. Yeah. And then one agency I was talking to this week, their backup data center is in Staten Island, which didn't do them all that much good when the last hurricane came through. So we were talking about business continuity. They're really looking at it, and a lot of customers are looking at it in a lot of different ways. One is how they can take some of these services that they run in their data centers and securely replicate them somewhere. Point, yeah. Both the data, the individual operating system instances, but also services, things like email, that may not require an operating system instance per se, because it can be hosted, right? Sure. Or web services like an Azure instance. A great example of this is the city of New York. You know, when you get into disaster recovery, they had a lot of resources they were bringing to bear, hotel rooms that they were getting for people, right? And they needed to track these hotel rooms because one agency would pick up a bunch of hotel rooms, another agency would, and they'd lose track of them when people checked out. So how are they going to track it? Well, people were scattered everywhere. They couldn't get into their buildings. So they went and they actually provisioned a couple of VMs in Azure, the Microsoft Infrastructure as a Service piece, a couple Server 2012 instances. They made a domain controller real quick. It took no time at all, really. And then a terminal server box, a remote desktop server box, I shouldn't call it terminal server, running access. And they made a quick access database. They gave people credentials, and they could log in wherever they were and get into that. It's an easy example, and as an infrastructure person, it's something I can do. There's other things in the cloud that are a little harder, like making a web page. I'm not a web developer, but I can make a remote desktop instance and a domain controller, secure it, and present it to people wherever. And that gives people a lot more flexibility from a cloud perspective. And those are the way people are trying to figure out how to agilely use these different infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and other pieces that are available to them from various providers.
Yeah, so. And your example there was a good one where it's really a net new type of solution that they're doing, and they were able to essentially get access to resources that they may have not had right on hand.
Right, and resources that aren't in a data center they don't have access to. Another example, and I just thought of this because we're in Gillette Stadium, was, nobody take this the wrong way, right? I live in Connecticut. Apparently, New York, one of the New York teams won the Super Bowl recently. I don't know. Right, and so they needed to scale up a website in New York.
We're going to make you wear a Patriot shirt.
Dude, I got my Sox hat. I got my Sox hat in the car. I'm up here more than anywhere else. And they needed to scale up a website really quickly for the city that they could use to raffle tickets off for the parade.
Sure.
Right? So what did they do? They didn't want to commit to buy a server or buy server instances. They put it in Azure. It scaled out for the demand they needed for a week. and then they just shut it down, right? So that scalable service, that's what I see in my customers. Sometimes they want the flexibility of scale, and other times they just want location, right? Get away from a data center.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, so from a database perspective, that's pretty scary. Why would I ever move that to a cloud? What are you crazy? So maybe just talk a little about, again, who you are, who you work for, what you're doing, and then how people may be looking at database. Is it an option to move to a public cloud service or not, or what are some things they should be looking at?
Sure. So my name is Mike Corey. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Entirety. I'm also an Oracle ACE and a V expert, and we're 100% focused on high-end databases being virtualized. And it's an interesting challenge. So the first thing is, if you're going to hand your crown jewels to anybody, what credentials do they have? And so I look for things like this. I don't know how many people here have heard of the UCS audit, Unified Cloud Services Provider Audit, which is an independent group that will look to make sure that people are backing these things up, that it's a real business. And so I would challenge people to make sure they know where they're going. In terms of a database, what we see is people using it for flexibility right now. And we're really struggling ourselves with understanding how do we leverage a platform like Azure or these third-party vendors. Are they real? How do we make it all work? And there are no easy answers right now. But I would caution people, understand the credentials of the vendor they're going to, because I use the example of a company that went through a UCS audit, and they went to the vendor that was hosting, and they found that there were no backups happening. Nice. And it was a bank running their business on this cloud.
You know, one place where I see people doing a lot of cloud database work is when they have big data applications.
Absolutely.
So the cost of storing data in someone's cloud is, in our cloud or another cloud, it's tiny compared to you putting a big frame in your data center and having those disks spinning all the time. And there's a lot of interesting ways to access that. And for data where maybe you don't need the highest speed access to all the data at once, those are really great applications. A lot of analytic applications, a lot of HPC applications are going to the cloud that way. But you're 100% right about backup and recovery.
And then the other thing I'd say to people is I think we're thinking about data bases and big data all wrong. To me, it's the dataverse. And really, I think I challenge people who are database administrators to stop focusing on a SQL Server database, an Oracle database, but really thinking about their company's data being part of the dataverse wherever it resides and having responsibility for managing and keeping it safe and making it available.
That's a great point. So, Chris, I'll let you go next. So, really, just again, most people know who you are, but who you are, what you do, and then I'd be interested to kind of hear your perspective of, okay, I've been doing virtualization. We can argue whether I'm 30% or 90% virtualized, but now I'm starting to consider maybe using something like vCloud, starting to move thinking about moving some of my workloads that way. What are some things I need to plan for, and specifically even from a networking perspective as well?
Yeah, so again, my name is Chris Colati. I actually work for VMware. I'm part of the cloud, was part of the cloud practice. And it's an interesting question because I've gotten a new appreciation for the networking side because I actually don't come from a networking background. But one thing we always talked about when anybody's trying to move to the cloud is really understanding the applications. I had a conversation with Duncan Epping a couple months ago when we were at VMworld, and one of the presentations we did really had the application at the center of the universe. Right? Because when you're starting to think about moving to cloud, you're going to be picking up your application, sending it to somewhere, whether it's Azure, whether it's CloudStack, whether it's VMware, it doesn't matter. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to have to deal with the networking challenges. And the biggest thing people don't understand is the dependencies from one part of an application to another or some outside source. So is it talking to a mainframe somewhere? Is it talking to a database somewhere? Is it talking to some obscure thing under somebody's desk somewhere? And people just don't understand that, I think, until they really go try to move the application, and then they say, well, okay, we moved it here, but now this doesn't work, or that doesn't work, or we got to pull it all back, right? So then they're pulling it all back out of the cloud, bringing it back inside because 9 out of the 10 things didn't work, or some of the stuff broke. And a lot of it might be networking based. I think some of it is just old code. I mean, I see so many people who don't use DNS, they use hard-coded IP addresses. So to move to cloud, it makes it very difficult from a networking perspective. Well, we talked this morning about how we've got some technologies that can help facilitate the lack of IP change, right, from network virtualization perspective. But if you do that, are you actually still understanding the interdependencies? And I think that's a big thing. It's really easy to fix the problem, put a Band-Aid on it, and say, well, now you can move it because the IP addresses don't have to change. But we still don't necessarily know how all those things are interacting. And I think that's something I see a lot.
I think the big thing there, just to keep in mind, is you got to really think about not just that application, but all the waterfall effect that's going to happen there as well. That interdependencies, and from an infrastructure perspective, networking, storage, server, all the different pieces.
I think we've all done it, right? We see a box that we're trying to move, and what's the first thing we all do to see if anybody's using it?
Yeah, turn it off.
Turn it off for a week and see who calls. Right? No phone calls come in for a week. You maybe unplug it. And then another week goes by and you unrack it. And then another week goes by, you might have to pull it out of storage. Right? Right? You know, because we've done it. So I think that's a big piece.
Perfect. Go ahead, Tom. I'll let you kind of take a little bit different angle on that, but just way people are planning to kind of move that way, and maybe a little bit more from a networking perspective as well.
Sure. So Thomas Kraus. I'm in Global Technology Solutions at VMware. It's kind of a skunk works group that works in the lab and gets in front of our field folks to educate them on our products and solutions, and even develop solutions where they don't exist already. I'm too close to something, maybe the speakers. And currently on loan. Can you guys scoot over a little bit?
He's adjusted in the back. He'll get you.
Good? Okay. And currently on load to our network virtualization business unit, which is the folks that comprise the Nicira company before the acquisition. I guess one of the things we see customers struggle with, I don't know if you've seen this, but customers a vast majority of our customers are not in the business of, let's say, building custom portals for their cloud. So they either fall into two buckets. They have the developer expertise to kind of build a custom portal that meets 100% of their needs, or they need to use an out-of-the-box product like vCloud Director or something else, which presents you with a portal which is somewhat not extensible, right? It's kind of all or nothing. You either write a portal, talk to our API, or use the existing portal. And in some cases, you get some extensibility functionality with blocking tasks and products like VCO. But I see a lot of customers in that area kind of in between. They don't want to use the out-of-the-box portal because it meets 70 to 80% of their requirements, but they don't have the developer expertise to actually develop a portal from scratch to do everything they want to do to integrate with everything they want to integrate. And that's ultimately a big challenge, because cloud is about not just a product or even a suite of products. It touches so many different things: financial systems, CMDBs, IPAM systems, to do it right and actually realize the cost savings.
I think that's a good point. As people are kind of planning, you've got what are the workloads, database, looking at it at a little bit higher level, and thinking all those interdependencies and what that networking infrastructure looks like. So, Tom, I'm going to kind of go off your point a little bit. You mentioned management of things. So I'd love to kind of we'll start, actually we'll go backwards this way, Tom,
sure.
All right? Since you messed up the microphone, won't wear the shirt. So talk a little bit more about management things. And the world's becoming multi-hypervisor. There's multiple clouds out there. How should people be looking at, is it another set of tools that I got to be looking at, another management platform? How should people be looking at and planning for it?
Great question, and one that I think gets overlooked a lot. When we first released vCloud Director 1.0, I had the chance to sit down with some engineers at IBM, distinguished engineers, and have these conversations about where they felt the industry was going and new roles in the enterprise that were going to come out of cloud. And there was this thought there would be this whole tier of cloud-related folks to manage, architect, and build these environments. In some of your smaller environments or mid-sized environments, that hasn't really materialized, and we're still dealing with virtualization folks who have gotten added responsibility. From a network virtualization, a cloud management standpoint, what I've seen typically is a layered approach. Sure. So you've got your abstracted and logical entities, and we've got tools to manage those. And then you've got your physical or virtual layer, and we've got tools to manage those. And in some cases, we can aggregate those SNMP traps or those syslog data into certain collection tools and present a unified view. Some tools do a great job at doing correlation between the different layers and telling you you've got I/O latency from this VM, and by the way, this HBA seems to be down. I'm guessing it's probably related. But it's definitely a challenge right now, and I think it's an opportunity, because right now we're dealing with it in layers.
Perfect. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I think it's funny. Ever since I was an administrator, somebody's been promising a single pane of glass.
So true.
For management, and I don't know that anybody's really fully done it, and
Microsoft
we're not
guy
getting into
over
that
here
debate. We're not going to do that one. But no, I mean, as an administrator, right? Even if you have one system that covers 80% of it, there's always going to be another system that
Sure.
you have to interface with, and it's really hard to think about how do you unify everything from. And I think this is what's tough is all of us that work for companies that develop the products, we don't always think about it from their point of view, right? And I always do that when I do projects and I try to think about how am I going to manage this. Good example was we have our vCloud stack, right? And we have vCloud Director, vCenter, VSM, and all these pieces and parts. And when 1.5 came out, I looked at it from a management perspective, and I said, how do we upgrade all this?
Right.
Like, what's the order of operations? All these things are interdependent. And I had to go write that. I actually wrote the documentation on how to do that. And I think management isn't just hands-on management. How do I manage this widget or that application? It's how do we manage the whole environment? You know, and I think it's tough because people came into my shop when I was an admin and said, hey, we got this new management tool. And I said, okay, yeah, cool, let's try it out. And next thing you know, you're getting alerts and bells and whistles and all these things. You're just shutting them off because it's just too much information, right? It either goes from no information to information overload on all these management pieces. And I think we've tried to do a pretty good job of trying to bring some of that stuff into the fold. And now with the Nicira piece, you know, we see another product that's got an API that we've got to talk to, that we've got to try to manage. And I think it's something that I hope, you know, down the line we see certainly more of, because from a cloud perspective, to Thomas's point, you don't have to interface with just one system. You're interfacing with every layer of abstraction in between, and now we're adding the network abstraction, and then you've got to talk to your CMDB, you've got to talk to the billing systems if you're a provider, right? You know, and how do you manage the billing piece? Is it per minute, per hour, per day? I mean, you know, somebody spins up a VM for five minutes. Do you even catch that?
Right. No, that's a good point. So, Mike, from your perspective, maybe speak a little bit about it. I'm kind of interested. Is there anything that management solutions should be doing that would help a database administrator the way?
Well, I guess I'd say I approach it from a whole different perspective. The first thing is it's a new language. So one of the ways we bridged the gap is we had our database administrators take the VCP courses. So when they're talking to the VM administrators or to the hypervisor administrators on Microsoft side, they speak the same language. The second thing is it's learning to play well in the sandbox. In the old days, I'd buy a physical box. I know I'm not going to get a new box for 4 years. Okay, I need 4 CPUs, ask for 12.
Yeah.
Right?
That mentality's still there.
And that mentality is very dangerous in a virtual world, because in a virtual world, I can right-click and add resources on the fly. And so it's really training yourself to understand, no, I really need to tell them what I need today, comfortably, to support the database or the application that's running, because I can always get more. And so I really do think it's a new paradigm of just enough resource, just at the right time, when I need it. And if I need more, well, right-click, it's just a right-click away. And so I would argue it's a new language. And I guess the third thing is understanding that I can have a problem in my virtual session, but the host might not be having a problem. So the DBA says, I'm paging and swapping. The server administrator goes out and he goes, wait, the box isn't paging and swapping. Understanding that there's the VM level and there's the physical host level, and you really have to correlate between the two, which means talking the same language.
That's a great point, Mike. Great. And last but least, Microsoft doesn't do anything with management, do they?
No. Oh, yes, we do, actually.
Oh.
And that's a good point from a correlation perspective. There was an email that Jeff actually sent out recently to a bunch of us about heterogeneous virtualization. We called it hetero virtualization, and we're making it a little sassier. But really, Gartner had an article that came out, I think, in the spring that talked about all these different, most organizations by 2000 whatever, right? That's Gartner, they've always got a projection of when things are going to happen, or will be running multiple virtualization layers, right? Whether they want to or not, because of various pressures and things, right? And the challenge becomes, as you said, visibility to what the physical hardware is doing, and visibility to what the VM's doing, and then correlating those together.
Sure.
Right, and that's where you look at some of the third parties that have really targeted that correlation piece, like Veeam, right? So if I run System Center, like I'm running System Center Operations Manager, right, and I have the Veeam plugin on my ESX hosts, it'll correlate the performance data of that into Operations Manager with the performance of the VM. So I can not only look at the bottom of it, but correlate it internally, so I can see. Right. SQL's hosing up, right? Why is SQL slow? Is it I/O on the physical hardware? Is it I/O in the VM? I can find the bottlenecks better because of the correlation. And that's where really some of these partners like Veeam, when you plug into Operations Manager, even when you're using something like VMware, it adds so much visibility into what you're doing and flexibility. That's just the monitoring piece, though. There's also the management piece of it, right? So being able to, regardless of your virtualization layer, provision systems where you need to. Those are the places where some of these open standard projects like OpenStack, which supports a lot of things, work, but also where we focused on from a Microsoft perspective. As Jeff pointed out, there's a lot of Linux that runs great on Hyper-V. And I remember last time I did a big presentation in Boston, it was at the Red Hat Summit here in Boston as the Microsoft guy doing virtualization stuff. And I survived. But the point with that is, our management stack does a great job of talking to those hypervisors, whether it be VMware, whether it be Xen, or whether it be Hyper-V, because we realize there's going to be a mix of things. But also, to your point, there are certain things you're going to want to do natively in VMware still. Even though you do have that one pane of glass, sometimes you got to open a window.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. So we say that 60% of the people that we actually survey are using multiple hypervisors, all at different level, but all that stuff is very important as well.
Yep.
So I want to make sure not everybody's late for their next session, but these guys are going to be around. I appreciate you guys coming up here and walking through some of that stuff. I think the whole management piece, multi-hypervisor piece, transitioning to the cloud, super important. So if you guys have any other questions, come up now or grab any of us at any time. But thank you and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
And Chris has a mic if you want to ask questions too, right? If anybody's got a question, just wave him down.
Not Hans.
Yeah.
Hans, bring it on.
It's on. So, does anyone have questions before they guys head off to the Genius Bar? I just want to say thank you. Hey, guys, I know your time is valuable, and to come out here for the day and help us learn more about virtualization is greatly appreciated. So, a big round of applause for you guys.
Thank you, Chris.